Conservatives built this country. We built this country because we're hardy. We work hard. We're resilient. We're tough. Mentally, as well as physically. And we get the job done. When the job gets harder, we dig in deeper. For months, Marilyn Gladu told her voters that crossing the floor was a betrayal of democratic accountability. She backed petitions demonizing Bill C-9, attacked liberal policies, attacked Mark Carney, and is about as far right as you can get on many of the conservative platforms and policies. Then, almost overnight, she became exactly what she campaigned against. People are asking us, what do we do now? Does our vote even matter? Well, let's take a look. So as we begin today's episode, we want to actually just go through who Marilyn Gladu actually is and what she has been putting out there in terms of her policy and how she's been representing herself and her constituents. So this is her on February 6th, proud to present this petition defending religious freedom and protecting Canadians' right to share their faith without government interference. This is a petition calling on the government to reject C-9. Not even 10 days later, she did the same thing, standing up for fundamental freedoms matters. I was pleased to present another petition from Canadians concerned about C-9 and its potential impacts on freedom of religion and expression. Canadians should always have the right to read, share, and live according to their faith without fear of government intrusion. This is on January 20th. Canadians are feeling the pain at the pump, and this hidden carbon tax will only make things worse, adding up to 17 cents a litre. Another Liberal tax hike means higher everyday costs families simply can't afford. Sign to take the tax off and restore affordability. Another petition. This is a post on January 23rd. This is Pierre Poilievre's speech right after Mark Carney's Davos speech. And somebody had something negative to say in the comments, and Marilyn Gladu responded. I believe it was Conservatives who cut our military to almost nothing under Stephen Harper. So Marilyn Gladu says, and in 10 years, the Liberals have done nothing, all in caps, on defense, no decision on planes, no battleships, missing 30,000 service people. And what does Carney do to meet NATO 2%? Moves departments of Coast Guard and air transport under defense so they could, and builds another $4 billion procurement bureaucracy that has bought nothing. She also made a video about this exact thing as well. She posts this, and this is related to her writing. 1 in 4 households in Sarnia and Lambton are experiencing food insecurity. Families in our community should not have to struggle to put food on the table. Conservatives will continue to fight for policies that bring down the cost of living and support Canadian families. Well, I agree with her on that. Conservatives will. So this is who Marilyn Gladu really is. And she has been this way for a long, long time. Now, this is disheartening. It sucks. Absolutely. But it doesn't mean we stop. Because that's not what conservatives do. That is not in conservative DNA. There's a saying in prize fighting. Everyone has a plan until you get hit. Well, we've been hit a few times. But it means we keep on going. And it means we keep hitting back. Remember what we said in the fall. The new weapon of the far left machine is despair. They want people to think, my vote doesn't matter. They want people to become disheartened. They want people to check out. And that way, they will never lose power ever again. But that's not what conservatives do. What we need to do is we need to take this as fuel. We need to take this and just inject that as a bit of nitrous oxide, as they do in the car racing business, and use that as motivation. And you say, not on my watch. And the vote absolutely does matter. And the reason why I know it matters is because in that next election, Marilyn Gladu is not going to be reelected. She can try to run on a Liberal ticket. I guarantee you she's not going to be reelected. Even right now, with all the pollsters saying that, Carney is in supermajority territory, Marilyn's riding is safe for the Conservatives. So she can go ahead and think that she's going to run in that riding in the next election and she's going to get reelected, but she has another thing coming, folks. This is why your vote matters. If you're in Marilyn Gladu's riding and you throw in the towel and you don't vote, well, that vote absolutely will matter because it's not on the docket. And every one of those votes brings the Liberals closer to winning that seat in the next election. I know, it sucks. I get it. We're in the same boat. And our MP, he's going to be fighting for his life in every single election going forward. He knows that. He knows it's going to be hard. And he knows it's going to be difficult winning his seat again. But that doesn't mean he stops. Doesn't mean he stops the work. Remember every hard day you've had at work. There's going to be weeks that you didn't want to go to work, but you did anyway. You got at it. You got the job done. Think of how many obstacles that have been put in front of you in your life, and you've just kept going, because that's what Conservatives do. Conservatives built this country. We build this country because we're hardy. We work hard. We're resilient. We're tough. Mentally, as well as physically. And we get the job done. When the job gets harder, we dig in deeper. That's what Conservatives do. And that's what we do here on Northern Perspective. And that's what we're calling all of you on to join us in continuing to step forward. You only lose a fight when you stop fighting. And Canada only becomes lost when it loses people that continue to fight for her. So that's what we're going to do. And there's reasons for optimism, folks. Because hubris and arrogance, a lot of you know, that can be a big, big problem. And here's some early indications as to why it might be a problem for the Liberals. On March 9th, Angus Reid put out a poll, or polling results rather. Just 1 in 4 say Canadian MPs who cross the floor should be allowed to finish the term with a new party. So look at this data, folks. So what this is showing you is people who answered this poll, they said who they voted for in the last election, and they answered the question. Imagine your own member of parliament decided they want to switch party affiliations in between elections. What would you like to see done in this case? And the real metric that matters is on the left. So this is the aggregate total. So 41%, that's almost the total number that are saying that they support the Liberals right now, say they should step down and recontest their seat in a by-election. 22% say they should serve out their term as an independent until the next election, and 11% say that they should vacate their seat until the next election. Only 26% say that they should be allowed to switch parties and serve out their term. That's an important number. That's that 1 in 4 Canadians. That means 75% of Canadians say you should not be allowed to just switch parties. So what does that mean? Well, that means that if you look at the current polling right now, most Canadians, including half of the Liberal support, are saying absolutely not. You should not be able to cross the floor. So that means the Liberals have a whole swath of people within their base that don't like what's happening. That may not be reflected in the polls right now, but it can be reflected in a campaign when all of this starts to be brought up. The mainstream media isn't too thrilled with what's going on as well, and they're sounding the alarm on the warning signs. Besides winning, what does a Liberal Party that will accept Marilyn Gladu actually stand for? This is the issue that the Liberals are going to start having. They're going to have an identity crisis, because when you have a progressive left-wing party that is accepting a fairly far right-wing person as Marilyn Gladu is, what does that say about the party? And this is what this article asks. They're not interested in representing Canadians. They're interested in getting numbers. And that's going to tick off a lot of people in the progressive left, that they're accepting conservatives into the party and changing what the party dynamic actually is. That's not going to be good for Carney over the long haul. Carney's floor cross power play is playing with explosives, and this is reflected in that Angus Reid survey. Marilyn, Gladu backed petition this year for automatic by-elections when MPs cross the floor. The petition calling for immediate accountability for voters closes April 17th and has more than 64,000 signatures. Marilyn, Gladu absolutely hated the Liberals until 8 seconds ago. So you have all of these articles that are starting to come out in the mainstream media about Marilyn Gladu, and they're not too complimentary. And they're not too complimentary of the Liberals themselves. And this isn't just on National Post and Toronto Sun, folks. This is on places like Globe and Mail. So the further right conservatives that the Liberal Party is accepting, it becomes a big problem for Mark Carney and his progressive caucus. And that becomes good news for Avi Lewis and the NDP. Because voters that are looking at this saying, I don't agree with what Marilyn Gladu, represents. And why is Mark Carney, accepting somebody like that? That doesn't align with what I want. So it's more likely that those people that were supporting the Liberals slide over to the NDP. If the Liberals keep forgetting about the NDP, which I think they have, they do so at their peril, because that is where they have the biggest chance to lose a lot of their base to the NDP. Now, I said that we have to get back at it, and we have to get to work. What do we need to get to work on? Well, let's talk petitions. So this is the first petition that we want to look at. This is the one that was actually referenced in the article, and it's E7025. So what this is this addresses floor crossing. So it says, whereas in Canada's parliamentary system, MPs are elected to represent their constituents under a party banner, but restricted floor crossing can erode voter trust and rising political corruption and scandals. And it goes on with the other points arguing what the problem is with floor crossing. The intent of the petition down below is to amend the Parliament of Canada Act to require that any member of Parliament who crosses the floor to join another registered political party must vacate their seat and trigger a by-election in their riding, while permitting them to sit as an independent without such a requirement. And this is the original one. This was sponsored by Leanne Rood, and this now has 67,823 signatures as of the time of this recording. Now, if there was any doubt about how Marilyn Gladu felt about floor crossers, this is a post that she put out back in January, and this was after Amarjeet Gill had put out a post saying, the Liberals have been approaching me, and I said to them, screw off. So Marilyn Gladu says, thank you for being true to the voters who elected you. I guess nobody else is allowed to cross the floor, but she's allowed to cross the floor. Let's get to the next petition. So here's a new petition, and this takes a little bit of a different form than the other one, but it still talks about the fact that democracy is important, and the candidates that are running, it's assumed that they are voted for based on not just themselves, but the leader of the party as well as the platform of said party. And what is this proposing to be done? Well, a lot of you have talked about this, and this petition actually calls on it to introduce legislation to establish a recall mechanism for any member of parliament who leaves their caucus to join another political party. Mandate that a recall petition process be automatically triggered within an electoral district once a member of parliament formally joins a different political party other than the one in which they were elected. Establish a requirement that if a recall petition receives signatures equivalent to at least 20% of the total votes cast in that riding during the previous federal election within 90 days, the seat shall be declared vacant, and require that a by-election be called immediately following a successful recall petition to allow voters to determine their representation under the altered circumstances. And this petition is sponsored by Vincent Ho, so thank you to Vincent for that. So this just opened on April 1st, and it has 1,900 signatures here. So This petition's interesting because it actually says, you know what? If the recall petition comes in and nobody signs the petition after the person crosses the floor, then that basically says that the constituents in that riding are okay with that person crossing the floor. That's what that says. But if 20% of the total votes, so let's say there was 40,000 votes that were cast in the last election and the person won by, say, 12,000 votes, all that is needed in that case, of the total votes of 40,000, 8,000 people need to sign that petition to say, no, we do not agree with this person crossing the floor. Then that seat is automatically declared vacant and it goes to a by-election. And then we actually find out if that is the will of the constituents. So that's a very interesting petition, and I think there's some neat mechanics in there. So what do we need to do? We need to be signing these petitions, folks. We need to be letting not just the MPs, but the entire House of Commons understand that Canadians don't buy floor crossing. No matter what party it is. Doesn't matter if they're going from Liberal to Conservative, NDP to Conservative, or Conservative to any other party as well. We don't support it. We think it's anti-democratic, and it's time to put a stop to it. And the will of the people will not be ignored. So we're asking everybody, sign this petition, share it, harass anybody you can in a good, friendly way to sign this petition, to push this petition, to share these petitions. Conservatives, get it done.